So I heard this analogy once as AI being, a paintbrush. So just because you have a paintbrush doesn't make you a great painter. So AI is just the paintbrush. You still have to be the painter. So you have to really leverage this tool to create what's genuinely you.
Welcome to the podcast about communication in business. I'm your host, George Torok. Did you know that I'm known as the speech coach for executives because I help business leaders deliver the intended message for greater success? And we do that through one-on-one coaching or group training for the team. On this podcast, you will hear insights and ideas from communication experts from around the world to help you get your message across more successfully. My guest today is George Arabian. Here's 3 facts that I think you should know about George. 1, he has over 25 years of experience in marketing, starting from building his first website in 1996. Who even knew what a website was back then? And when the internet certainly was in its infancy, because the web had only been around for, I think, about 3 or 4 years at that time, the World Wide Web, which laid the foundation for his company Envision. That's with an N. And he leads one of Canada's top digital marketing agencies, Envision, known for combining consulting and execution and focusing on lead generation and brand awareness for mid-market B2B clients in key industries, including manufacturing, professional services, and technology. Oh, and 3, George is married with 4 kids, and he emigrated to Canada from Lebanon to escape war. And that's always a good reason to move. There's a war coming, let's move. George Arabian, welcome to Your Intended Message.
Thank you very much, George. It's always great to speak with another George. And your podcast certainly resonates with me. I've listened to many of your intended message and messages, and I'm excited to be here. So thank you for having me.
Delighted to be talking with you, and I know we're going to have fun. And here's a concept that you introduced to me, and it was one I hadn't heard before, and that's the concept of holistic digital marketing. And I made a point of Googling it, looking it up, and it actually exists, or it does exist. It's not just in your mind. However, it's obviously in your mind and on your mind, and help us understand what is holistic digital marketing. Is it just another silly phrase being thrown about, or is there substance to it?
Yeah, great. So thank you again for having me. So yes, it is just another phrase. I mean, everything is another phrase, but traditionally speaking, people are more familiar with omni-channel marketing, where you're kind of trying to touch the right individuals or your audience in different channels of marketing. So you're diversifying your marketing initiatives. Holistic is very similar in that you are trying to touch your audiences at various points through various touch points throughout their journey, but leveraging realistically, from my perspective, digital, which is where I live. So non-traditional mediums, I guess now they are kind of traditional in that they've overtaken the traditional medium. So they are the norm now. Things like Meta and Google and YouTube and all those kinds of great platforms. So holistic marketing is really looking at your user, their journey, and what needs to be placed in front of them to captivate them to improve your probability of converting them into a prospective client.
And I see your role as discovering where they live, where the customer lives, where the clients live, the prospects, where they live, what are their concerns, what are their fears, what are their hopes, and then you kind of reach out a hand to them and saying, here, I'll take you along the path. I know it might be scary, and there's some things that maybe I can help explain along the way. And that's maybe a silly way of putting it, but that's the image that I get.
Yeah, I think conventionally, people are, from the perspective of the general consumer, what you're trying to do is get them from that initial awareness where they don't know who you are or that you even exist. Take them from that to becoming your biggest advocate, where they're shouting from the rooftops about your services or products. So the best customers are exactly those ones, the ones that are going to help promote you. And as business owners, we know that, your easiest line to getting a sale is somebody you've already done business with, right? And referrals have a tendency to have a lot more weight. We know this statistically with customers than those that are net new, that have never heard from you and they're kind of experimenting with whether or not you'll actually deliver on your promise. So we want to get people from awareness all the way to advocacy or ambassadorship, and there are numerous stages to get them to that point that you have to be very cognizant of as a marketing organization. It can't just happen whereby, you show one Meta ad or one Google ad, or you write one blog or do one video. It's a combination of all of those things. And our roles as marketers are to try to make that as efficient and effective as possible, because it is a lot of work and very sophisticated.
George, when you start to work with a new client, you try to help them take their prospects through that process. What are some of the first questions that you have for your client?
So often when clients first approach us, we want to understand, and it's a great question, George, we want to understand, have they done marketing and are they even aware of what is available to them? Oftentimes what tends to happen is somebody's heard from somebody that they've done something, whether it's I was on social media, or I did a Google ad, or I did SEO, which is common. The term has been around for a long time, but they don't understand the nuances. And every business contextually and from a nuance perspective is unique. So every business owner, every chief marketing officer, every organization has unique business goals, whether that's financial growth, awareness, perhaps even from the perspective of recruitment. Oftentimes we get into scenarios with clients where they're actually not looking for financial growth for marketing. They're looking to recruit good individuals to join their organization. So that in and of itself could be a marketing initiative to put yourself out there. So there's a variety of different things. So the first question that we ask is, have you done marketing? Because we need to know if they understand the value of what this offers, what this thing can do for them with respect to changing the trajectory of where they are today to where we want to take them to.
What's your definition of marketing? So when you ask someone, have you done marketing? What if they respond with, well, it depends. What do you mean by that?
It's a great question again, George. And I think I leave it very broad because I want to understand how they interpret marketing. I want to understand what they really know about marketing. Because when I ask, have you done marketing? And somebody immediately responds with hypothetically, yes, we've done SEO. Great. You've done it. How's that worked for you? And the typical answer I will tell you is, I don't know. and that's not a joke. I mean, 9 out of 10 times I'm getting that answer. I'm not sure what it's done for me. Well, then now we start to peel away that onion and we start to get more granular to understand, have you looked at your quantifiable metrics? Have you looked at the user behavior of the traffic you're driving from SEO? So we start to get a lot more detail oriented because it's imperative that they understand there are things that you need to look at as a business owner or as a marketing division within a business on a regular basis to really appreciate, is this thing that we are doing aligning with our business objective and our goal? And oftentimes we find that it's absolutely not. There's a huge division between what the marketing team is doing and what the business is actually trying to achieve.
Why do you think that is?
I think, again, as much like you, who puts out a lot of education and knowledge into this world, whether it's through, your intended message, your podcast, or the books you've written, I think people just don't know. And oftentimes the fixation is closing the deal. As a marketing agency, it's let's just close the deal, as opposed to let's educate our audience so that they themselves can ask better questions of marketing agencies. So education becomes a big part of it. And that's the big gap that I find, is that because of the pace of how fast digital moves, it's very hard for the general individual who's not really from this world. They're running their manufacturing organization or their professional services organization. Their focus isn't staying on top of what's happening in the digital space. That should be the focus of what you're hiring a marketing agency for. Much like if you go to a doctor, if you're, feeling sick, your doctor is not going to ask you to get a haircut. They're going to tell you let's diagnose this by doing some tests, taking blood work, whatever. We're doing the same things, except we're asking a lot of questions, looking at the data that they have at their fingertips, and then educating them to show them what's actually happening. So education is really what's lacking. And it's okay. I mean, it's a tough world to be part of because it moves at such a rapid pace.
And certainly almost everything online can be overwhelming and confusion. And just when you think you know how Facebook works or LinkedIn works, they change it. They change how it works. They change the priorities. So it's challenging for any business owner or professional to be good at what they do, but also try to stay up to date with what's happening online in whatever channel. George, the term marketing, I think, is often misunderstood. I guess one question I have is, do you see it as science or art?
I see both. I truly do. And the science behind marketing is understanding the algorithms and how they frequently do change. The art part of it is, yes, it's understanding that ideal client that you're trying to get in front of and what actually resonates with them. So I'm not talking about the aesthetic part of it only. The aesthetic is very important because that's what draws. Our eyes are drawn to the visuals, but the words matter as well. So the vernacular and the nomenclature and the narratives that we're drafting when we're coming up with initiatives to draw and earn people's attention, that leads us to taking them to a specific destination of where we're telling them more about our thing. We have short attention spans as human beings, as we all know, especially today. Research is telling us that over and over. So how do we captivate an audience? Well, visually, through the text and the words that we're using, but then what is going to compel them to take an action, right? So there is this marriage of understanding the science behind user behavior and what appeals to them through the visuals and again, the content and how that's all being structured. And then the frequency of touch points. So everything from the awareness stage to advocacy, there are a lot of stages in between those two that require in some form of communication, whether it's through the consideration stage, there's conversion, there's engagement, adoption, retention. These are the stages that I like to always look at in silos, but they're all interconnected. So yes, there's definitely form and function or art and science involved in all marketing.
You mentioned some stages there between awareness and advocacy. How many stages are there, or does it depend on the market, the product?
It does. It's a good question, George. So it does depend on the nature, again, context and nuance of what we're trying to achieve. Traditionally, I think most marketers are aware of the principle of AIDA, which is awareness, interest, desire, action, which is the funnel. I think there's more to it than that. I think I break it down. I break the customer journey down today in 7 stages. I know it's a little more complex, but I break it down as awareness, consideration, conversion, engagement, adoption, retention, and then advocacy. So there's overlap and a little bit of gray, but when I start to really detail these out for, when I'm speaking to clients of what each of those buckets mean, it becomes very clear as to why you need all 7 stages and the things you need to be doing throughout those 7 stages. So yeah, it's a little more complex in my mind. I try to not oversimplify things because I do feel marketing is actually quite complex. I think if we dumb it down, it doesn't do anybody any good.
Curious to note that in your journey, the end of the journey, the goal is not the sale. The goal is actually to create them, convert them into being an advocate for you. Why is that last step so critical?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's important to understand that it is very difficult to get somebody from awareness to advocacy. I mean, you are putting out a lot of content and material into the world, and you want to optimize that benefit, right? So once you've gotten a client through your door, that acquisition, the cost of that acquisition to actually attain them costs you a lot. if you actually put it down in numbers. So why not leverage that now that you've built that relationship as a bilateral relationship where you entice them, or, you bring them into your community, you give them incentive to really, again, I use the term shout at the rooftops, really get out there and leverage that relationship, because they're going to be your best ambassador at the end of the day. The person who's done business with you, who's satisfied with the products and services you've provided them, who's happy with everything that your staff or your team has done for them. You want to be top of mind when somebody else, their network, speaks to them, and all of a sudden it's like, I know a company or I know an individual you can speak to. You want to be that individual, right? So the actual client acquisition cost is quite high if you actually put all the efforts involved. Depending, again, nuance and context become important. If I'm selling a t-shirt, I might be enticed to buy a t-shirt today, and it will take me 3 minutes to do a Google search for the t-shirt I want, look it up, buy it, and I'm done. Now, how does that organization retain me or make me that advocate? It might be a little more challenging, but there are certainly mechanisms out there. But when you're a B2B company that your life cycle from initial engagement to sale could be 6 months to a year of information and meetings, like the last thing you want to do is not leverage all that work you've put in for that client acquisition cost and not leverage that individual as an advocate. And there are simple things that can be done to leverage them, like request a Google review, request a potential opportunity for them to come on a podcast, like your intended message, and speak, show their professional presence to the world. Like, there are things that can be done that are quite simple these days to actually execute that put them in that advocacy or ambassadorship bucket.
How best to reward those people who do advocate for you?
Yeah, I'll give you two examples. I'll give you a B2C example. Okay. I'm a big Converse guy. I wear Converse. Everyone knows that I wear my Chucks proudly. As a kid, as you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, we immigrated here. So, my parents are the typical immigrant story. They came with no money, nothing. I was always, as a young kid growing up, jealous of the kids in the schoolyard who had Converse. I never had Converse. We couldn't afford them. As I got older, obviously through a lot of hard work, my wife actually bought me my first pair of Converse because she knew how much I've always loved them. And so I've become just kind of part of their ecosystem, and I've subscribed to their newsletters, and I follow them on social media platforms. And one of the things that they do from a B2C perspective is on my birthday, they will send me a special promotion to buy more Converse. Now, obviously, they're looking at it from a capitalistic perspective to benefit from my advocacy, but I always take advantage of that 25% off my next pair of Converse. Why wouldn't I, right? But that's a unique custom email that I get on my birthday that says, "Happy birthday, George. Here's a little something to treat you," and it's 25% off. So really cool way of, building that retention and that loyalty and that advocacy. And I wear their shoes everywhere I go. So, I'm kind of helping the brand. From the perspective of a B2B organization that can help leverage those same things, one of the things that I really love doing is asking our B2B clients to take part in a testimonial video. You can ask for a Google review, which now, marries you together in a way that is very beneficial when people read your reviews and they see that so many B2B companies have left positive reviews. It's a great tool for any organization to leverage. But one of the things, I take it a step further, I actually will do a video whereby we cross-promote one another in a way. They're giving us their video testimonial about the benefits of our services and our offerings and the experience they had. And in return for that, they get a lot of kind of like be-real or evergreen content that they can leverage themselves. So it benefits both of us. So now what that does as well is now it's opened up the door to like, hey, maybe we should be doing more videos as well. Look how beneficial these videos are and how great these videos are for engagement with our audience. And I'm talking from the client perspective. So they get this little sprinkle of this thing that they've never experimented with, which is video, which is so beneficial. So we give and we ask. It's a give and take. It can never be a take thing. It's got to be a give and take relationship, right? Just like Converse gives me 25% off on my birthday, I take advantage and I buy a new pair of Converse on my birthday for myself selfishly. With B2B, I give them content, be real, stuff that they can use. In return, all I'm asking for is a positive video of their experience. So
now, George, what I'm noticing in both of those examples is the use of, or the triggering of, emotion. So in case of, it's your birthday, so naturally you want people to remember and look at a birthday gift. Oh, and I can treat me, make me feel special on my birthday. So yeah, there's that emotional connection. And I see with the videos that you create for your clients, they go, oh, I look pretty good in video. Hey, maybe we should do more of this. Yeah, I don't mind doing this at all. They made me look good. I sound good too. And so there's that emotional trigger I see in there that I'm guessing is actually probably critical throughout the whole process.
It absolutely is. You have to touch on people's emotions. I mean, psychology is a big part of this, going back to the science of web. Psychology is a big part of triggering somebody's emotion to take an action. So what we're typically experimenting with, marketing is this gigantic hypothesis. Like, we come out with a hypothesis and we present it to the client. We say, we assume, based on all this amazing data that we have and understanding your audience and who you're trying to target, here's what we're going to do. Great. So we execute that thing, and then we start pivoting. We start identifying, like, we create benchmarks, and we say, this experiment worked great. This one, not so much. Well, why? Well, maybe the hook wasn't as powerful as this hook. Maybe the perception that this sets is different than the perception that this sets. So we start pivoting and changing little things around to see how we can trump our king. So in essence, you're always continuously experimenting, but what you're doing is you're actually triggering people's emotions by using words or images that resonate. And there's a lot of science behind that as well, as to what words should be used at what times during what stages of their buying cycle. Right. So yeah, it's quite fun, to be honest. It's quite an enjoyable thing where you can make subtle changes and see dramatic differences in impact to the audience.
And it's interesting when you say that, because I've noticed that in messages that I've received from marketers, and it's especially the mistakes that I notice, and it's subtle changes, and even something as simple as I get requests from people who want to be on my podcast, and naturally I'm always looking for guests, so I'm happy to get that. However, I'm looking in those requests, I'm looking for what they know about me already. Mm-hmm. And when I see what's clearly all about them, I'm not interested, because I know it's going to be a lousy interview at best. It's all going to be about them. And they've already showed me that they're not going to put in the effort to help promote the podcast as well. And it's subtle things that make a difference.
Of course. And the effectiveness of that message is either going to get them the opportunity to speak with you or not. And what we were speaking about just prior to coming online on this podcast was AI, and how that's made it so easy to just blurt out generic messages. I get them all the time on LinkedIn as well. I mean, that's the platform that I leverage, George. So, oftentimes I'll get a very generic, hey, here's my calendar, book a time with me to speak. I'm like, who are you? What is this all about? I'm not looking for a sales pitch. I'm looking for authenticity and genuinity and creativity. And that's what's going to resonate with audiences. It's not a generic script that says, I saw your profile on LinkedIn. You would be a great contributor to this thing. Here's a link. Book a time with me. Well, wait a second. You want me to do the hard work to book a time with you? How about you tell me a little bit about yourself, introduce who you are, what you're all about? I mean, it's become a little too easy these days, but I think that's those of us who are in this space can really clearly differentiate between those who are, just casting a gigantic net versus those who are authentically spending time researching who you are. And those are the people I want to connect with, right?
Yeah. And on LinkedIn, for example, when people want to connect with you, they can write a note, or they just click connect and it sends an automatic message. And the message that comes through is, I want to connect with you. Really? How cold, how arrogant is that? I don't care what you want. I don't know who you are. Versus someone who writes a note and say, hey, I looked at your post, like that last one about such and such. Let's connect here. Maybe there's some synergy between us. Something.
Yeah, exactly. That just something, right? Just some depth, just so we can get to know each other. I actually I talk a lot about marketing as being like dating, like if you're going to get to know me, ask me questions to get to know me. Don't just approach it like, hey, you're now my thing or whatever, or we're not, it's a relationship that we're trying to nurture here to see if this is going to work out. And no relationship, if I were to be at a restaurant and somebody just walked up to me and sat down and said, now we're friends, I would be like, get out of here. Right? No, we have to have some dialogue. I need to understand who you are our values aligned, So yeah, that kind of stuff really puts a negative taste in my mouth.
You mentioned AI. We talked about it before the interview. Is that making digital marketing, holistic digital marketing, is it making it worse or better?
I think it's a great question, George. I think what I'm finding now is AI is an amazing mechanism for efficiency. It still needs human engagement for authenticity and the voice. You're starting to see now with the mass appeal of ChatGPT, common trends in people's posts. You see common terminology being used, and you can kind of almost immediately identify that it was written by AI. I'm not suggesting that it's not. Like, you can allow AI to ideate with you and come up with kind of the core concept of what you're trying to put into the world, but then modify it. Make it, your voice, your tone, use words that you would genuinely use in your day-to-day communication. Don't let the machine control what you say. You control the machine. So I heard this analogy once as AI being, a paintbrush. So just because you have a paintbrush doesn't make you a great painter. So AI is just the paintbrush. You still have to be the painter. So you have to really leverage this tool to create what's genuinely you. So yeah, I think it's beneficial. I think it's going to morph and change and adapt over the coming days, weeks, months, how quickly it's moving right now. But I think people can't lose sight of the fact that they still need to be unique and genuine to who they are.
We're still people. And AI, I can't imagine it's ever gonna be emotional.
Yeah, I don't never say never, I guess, but it's so difficult to appreciate. I actually have a question for you. Something that I align well with, and it's something that I've said. But in your book, The Secrets of Power Marketing, you emphasize that marketing is about perception, not necessarily fact. I'm curious, from your perspective, how can a small or mid-sized businesses use this to kind of outshine their competitors with bigger budgets?
A relevant point. Oh, wow. And yeah, and you're right. And yes, marketing is more about perception than it is about fact. And it's not that the facts don't count. It's that what is the perspective, the perception that people have of you in terms of who you are and what you can do for them. And one of the perceptions is, why should they choose you over someone else if they believe you're better, especially if, and again, when price isn't the issue. When it's about quality, then it's about how they perceive. Now, here's an example of actually that relates to the book. After I published the book, people that I had known for a long time treated me differently. They treated me with more respect because now their perception was, oh, he's an author. He must be an expert. Well, I'm the same person I was last week. And by the way, it took me 2 years to write that book. So, but people's perception changes. And the same thing is about how when you build trust. And so, for example, the birthday gift that you received from Converse, that creates a perception in you that, they care about me. And that's your perception. They care about me. Now, they do that for all their customers, but you feel special because they did something for you on your day. So that's your perception. They care. They don't really care. But
I'd like to think they care a little bit.
and maybe they do. Yeah. But yes, but you're right. The perception is a huge factor. George, as we prepare to wrap up, imagine you could sit down with a business leader who's looking at the year ahead, thinking about their marketing. Perhaps they're unhappy, or perhaps they just don't know how effective their marketing is and where they should put their limited budget. What might be 1, 2, or 3 pieces of advice that you would give them?
The first piece of advice I would give anyone who's about to enter or has been in marketing and is unsure of its effectiveness is eliminate tactics from the conversation completely. So start by aligning your marketing initiatives with your KPIs, your core objectives for your organization. So every organization should have some sort of goals that they're working towards, obviously. And if you don't, then that's okay too. Then those need to be defined. I need X percentage of growth, or I'm trying to capture this client base, or whatever the case may be. When you approach marketing from the perspective of, I need SEO, that is very wrong. That is the strategy or the tactic, as opposed to what are we trying to achieve. I always look at it as outcomes. What is the outcome that we're looking for? So ask yourself that very question. If you're talking about tactics, remove them from the equation at the beginning and identify what outcome you're looking for. And that could be aspirational, that could be ambitious, big, hairy, audacious goal, but what is the outcome that you want? That's the greatest place you can start, because that gives the marketing company you're about to embark on this journey with something to work towards, or something to come back to you with and say, it ain't realistic. I'm sorry to tell you, but you're a $10 million company and you want to be a $100 million company and you have a $3,000 a month budget. It ain't going to jive. So what is realistic, right? But it's a foundation to have good, healthy conversations.
Valuable advice that people should consider. My guest today is George Arabian, reminding you that the goal isn't to get them to buy. The goal is to get them to be an advocate, to stand on a rooftop and shout your name. If you like what you heard, tell your friends and post your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, because that helps more listeners find us. Come back every week for more practical insights to help you deliver your intended message. I'm your host, George Torok.